Folks, welcome inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Coming to you live on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app and stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. Can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. And I've had this cat on my radar for a long time. I've done a deep dive into all musics that stretch the lineage in our country that go way back in time. Sam Cooke and Ray Charles and R&B, Bird, Charlie Parker, and cats like Jack Teagarden and jazz, and the original rockers like Little Richard and Elvis and Fats Domino. And bluegrass is no different. The original father of bluegrass was Bill Monroe. And people like Peter Rowan learned under his tutelage. People like Bill Keith learned under his tutelage. Even though David Grisman never played with him, he introduced his own brand of doggrass to our American musical lexicon. And today I get a chance to talk to a cat who has continued to expand the lineage of music and the vocabulary of music in his own way. In many prolific settings. He's seems to stay on the northeastern part of the country quite a bit, which is more mellow and obviously more accepting of melodic music. But he originally hails from San Francisco area and has really has continued to be a prodigious painter and artist on his musical palette, over the last 4 or 5 decades. Darol Anger, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, it's great to be here, Jake. Wow, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem.
Hopefully I'll be able to contribute something interesting and worthwhile here.
I wanted to ask you about this is sort of an ego question, but do you feel like there was a certain period of time where you were adding vocabulary to the American musical lexicon?
Well, as part of a group, I think, we were pretty conscious of trying to, certainly fill in, blank spaces within the general instrumental universe of certainly North American music, and of course that includes the world. I think, especially, the work I did with David Grisman, where we were really kind of expanding the repertoire of, kind of the standard bluegrass-based string band, because we had a couple of mandolins, guitar, string bass, and fiddle, and that is pretty close to, and occasionally banjo. We actually did have a whole tour with Bela before Bela kind of got, famous,
right.
and started his own thing. That was fun. We were kind of just doing stuff that people didn't expect out of string band, styles of music, plus the original stuff, which was really based on, pop music. I mean, we were all kind of ruined for any kind of pure traditional music by the Beatles, who, just were great, combiners. They were always looking for ways to bring in other styles of music. The idea of music is that kind of universal language. And then later, with the Turtle Island String Quartet, that was a real conscious decision to integrate the language of jazz and contemporary pop music into the string quartet, which people associate with classical music, Western European art music, whatever we're calling it. But we knew that it was capable, and from my work with David, I knew that any instrument can kind of play any kind of style of music if you figure out how to do it. And so that was a really interesting thing where we used some rhythm techniques that I had developed and learned from a guy who played with Bill Monroe, a fiddle player, Richard Green, to expand the ability, so that a string quartet could play all the parts, all the drum parts, the percussion parts, the accompaniment parts, like piano and guitar parts, as well as just solo and things like that. So
can you talk? This is interesting. I've done 3 interviews with Richard. Can you talk about? I'm sorry. What exactly was? I mean, Bill. I talked to David 3 times as well, and I mean, I asked him. I asked him originally about
cool.
When he first added a trap set and why he did that. But I mean, Bill Monroe did not have a trap set. So could you?
Sure didn't.
Richard Green was influential to you because he. What do you mean he was playing all the parts? Can you break that down?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the idea of a string band in general is that everybody is the drummer, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't just have a drummer. Everybody is part of a giant trap kit, consisting of all the instruments, and everybody is responsible for like making the groove and the rhythm happen. So that is certainly a huge part of bluegrass. Bluegrass certainly, up to that point was the most exciting rhythmic music that you could play, in a string band, and I think that's one of the main reasons why so many people were attracted to it. Richard. And his tenure with Bill Monroe was encouraged to play rhythm, along with Bill, because part of any, playing with any band is learning the groove and learning the rhythm of the group. Every group has a characteristic rhythm. It might be a whole set of rhythms, but certainly. Many famous groups, you might even have one groove that they do, and they do it better than anybody else. But at any rate, Richard was encouraged to just play along with Bill when Bill was doing chopping, right? The chop.
The chop. That's like right. The chop. Yeah.
Yeah. The chop is like the snare drum. It's like plays the backbeat. Usually the mandolin. When the mandolin is soloing, somebody else has to do that. So Bill said, "You play along with me, Richard. You play exactly what I play." So Richard was doing that for a couple of months, and eventually figured out how to do more than just chunk the bow down on strings. He actually could figure out how to get a sound going down on the strings and coming up from the strings. So from that technique, it was a brand new technique. Nobody had done anything like that before, and it's very, very exciting. And super rhythmic. Turned the violin into a kind of like a guitar, a drum and a guitar together. And that was when I heard Richard doing that. When I met David and those guys, I was a kid, and David and Richard were not that much older. I think they were just turning 30.
That's what I love about it is that this is so classic because, I mean. You kind of you're just on a little bit of a younger tangent than the quote unquote graybeards like Rowan and Green, like But this is my question though. Is that when I interviewed Bela a few years ago, I asked him about, I don't know what the question was, but he said that he was heavily impacted by going to see Return to Forever and seeing Chick Corea playing.
Oh yeah,
playing these chromatic, just playing the sonic expansion that they were doing, and Bela said, every note he's playing is on the banjo. I just need to find it, and I know you grew up in San Francisco, and I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, anger really needs to break down. A time when you were sort of, it could have been a horn player, it could have been in a jazz context. What was an awe-inspiring moment in a quote-unquote jazz setting when you were, like late 60s or early 70s when you were when you saw somebody play music, free music or improvisation, and you said, boy, I got to find those notes.
Yeah, well, jazz has always been in my life. My parents were one of that generation of people, millions of people who bought the Dave Brubeck Time Out record, which had
Morello, yeah.
Take 5 on.
Yeah,
Morello.
Yeah.
Joe Morello, Joe F. Morello. What an amazing drummer that guy was.
Unreal.
And of course, as far as tone goes, I'd already started playing the violin. Just listening to that with like no real context, right? So many people bought that record just saying, well, I guess I must like jazz. So everyone has it, so I guess I'd better get it too. But it happened to be incredible music. time, certainly time signatures and things like that. But just the tone of that record. If you go back and listen to that record, it is some of the best sounding recording, just as a recording, you will ever hear, ever. It stands up to anything nowadays. And, of course, all those guys were tone guys. Joe Morello, of course, Eugene Wright, the bass player, and Paul Desmond, who would introduce himself as the world's slowest sax player. You know, he was not, he didn't play a million notes, but what he did play was great, and his tone was incredible. And I realized, that my benchmark for tone on any instrument, certainly on the violin, comes from that very early encounter with the recording of Paul Desmond. So, I've
can you
always
specifically? This is so important. So, he had this more. I'm actually producing a film documentary on Stan Getz, and Getz.
Oh, fantastic! Well, Getz was another guy.
Again, what's insane, what's really quite remarkable is what a sociopath and an insane person he was. But
right, yeah.
but
when he picked up the horn.
Exactly. It was the most. First of all, the sequencing of his melodic ideas was like ridiculous. It was probably the greatest.
Yeah.
He's the greatest. But at the same time, he was he had 4 women at one table thinking they were all with him. And then during the set break, he'd go and hit on the bass player's wife, and then tell the bass player that. So he was kind of a jerk in some ways, but he was. But what I'm saying is, can you go deeper with Desmond's the sonic nature of it, and how was that the cat where you were like, I got to incorporate some of this into the violin, can you talk about that?
Well, this happened at such an early age. I was not even conscious of that. But when I think about a melodic instrument, that happened early enough, and I listened to that record a lot and read the liner notes over and over again because I was a reader. Even at that age.
Sure.
It just got into my head that that's the way you're supposed to sound. If you play a melodic instrument, you have to make melodies, and you have to sound incredible. It's like the chocolate tone. It's like it's all the space around it. This beautiful kind of mocha chili sound. Just very deep, dark. And that's okay. Well, that's the way somebody's. That's the way somebody's supposed to sound. It's like imprinting or something. It's a baby duck at that level. Okay, that's the sound. And when I heard somebody like Vassar Clements, his tone, I heard him first on John Hartford's Aeroplane record, and then next, right after that, the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band's Circle Beyond Broken record came out, and Vassar was all over both those records. And his sound, especially on the World Circle Beyond Broken record, corresponded to me. It has very many parallels with those guys, those saxophone sounds. And of course, Vassar, has said repeatedly over and over again, well, I'm just trying to.
Dude, I'm upset. I can't. I don't know if you ever got your hands on this record. Pacific Standard Oil released all these records, LPs in 1974, strings, keyboards, woodwinds, percussion, and one of them was dedicated to strings. And so, there was a track by David and Richard talking about what they called new acoustic music, and then there's this one track though, and this young female interviewer, and she's really hip and kind of spaced out, and she's interviewing Vassar, okay, and I swear, dude, this dude was such a street scholar, and this is what I love about the fact, because you are right on that cusp of sort of. Before academia, there was schooling in music, but vocabulary wasn't, and so Vassar's like, this girl's asking him, like, something to the effect of, what I loved about Vassar was just, he could say 8 words, and they were the most profound 8 words I've ever heard. He was like, well, he's like, God, I can't even do it justice. He goes, someone plays the he's like, someone plays the fiddle really, really good. It sounds good, but if it's really bad, it's really, really bad. Just like, I mean, the guy was just a salt of the earth character, and I've done I mean, this is one reason I wanted to connect with you, because I have tried to approach this thing. We become so stratified in music and everything. There's an R&B station, there's a rock station, and you guys came up with it when it was all music, and so Vassar, I mean, that dude just burned so hard, and yet it wasn't like, he wasn't like, steeped in academia. It was just, I loved how mellow and how beautiful and how burning he was. And so, anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Just, I love that cat so much, dude.
But yeah, I think everybody, has got to love Vassar. You just, just hearing him, but also meeting him. He was such a great guy. You obviously talked to him a lot. He was just a sweet fella, and certainly, probably one of the last great self-taught fiddle players. Like completely I mean, he just heard Chubby Wise on the radio and tried to copy it. He just figured out how to do it.
Did you ever come across this cat? I think his name was Red Taylor.
Yes,
dude,
Merle Taylor.
Dude,
Taylor.
That dude was on the razor's edge, dude. And I'll tell you, he had a trap set in his band too. You were just marinating in this stuff. The idea here is anger. According to Wikipedia. You were birthed in music starting when you started in 1977, but I don't believe that. I believe that you started earlier. I believe that you had bands. What I'm saying is I believe you had gigs and bands prior to joining Grisman. So I want to get, because I mean, listen, I've had how deep my show. I'm at 39 years old. I basically have gone and documented a time before I was born where at the Jabberwock, Richard Green almost took out Herb Peterson's eye with an up bow. This is back in '66. So I know that you were probably a little bit too young to maybe play with them, but with the Peanut Gallery where they let younger cats sit, without it. Can you please paint the picture of late '60s, early '70s anger, and where you were at musically, and kind of what were you experimenting with? Because like you said, Richard Green at that point in '72 with C Train was, he was putting wah-wah pedals on the fiddle.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's go back to 1964 when I was an 11-year-old kid living in New Jersey temporarily before I moved to California, and the Beatles took over. They washed away everything. I was listening to pop radio like every other kid that age, and something about the Beatles did it for me, and I immediately wanted to become a guitar player. So my parents bought me a cheap guitar, which was so cheap that it was not actually physically playable. Big shortage of cheap playable guitars in that time period. That changed, of course, but at that point it was not. I actually encountered that guitar maybe 10 years later when I was just in my late teens, and it still was unplayable. I still couldn't play it. So it wasn't my fault. And it wasn't their fault. They didn't know. They were trying to help me out.
Was it? I want to be clear though. Like this was the Beatles.
But I was into music. '64.
Yeah.
Right?
So this was before Forest Hills, like before Dylan plugged in and things like that.
Well, I suppose I was kind of unaware of the.
I would assume you were 11 years old, basically.
Yeah, I was just whatever was being fed to me, on TV and radio.
Sure.
That was what I was into, and the Beatles were quality. I could recognize that at least. And so, but with the guitar, it didn't happen. So we were in a restaurant I was in a restaurant with my parents, and some guy was strolling tables with a violin, and he seemed to be having a great time. He was playing, screwy shit, it's crazy stuff. Sorry about that.
Let it fly. We're good. We're streaming worldwide,
okay.
But we're not held down by FCC. Right. So go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, anyway, he was, but it looked fun and it looked easy, So oh, that looks a lot easier than guitar. I'll play that, because I want to be playing music. I want to play music. So they found me a violin. Actually, a friend of the family had a violin. So I went into violin. Well, the state of violin instruction in 65 or whatever it was it was you either play classical music or nothing.
Exactly.
I had no idea fiddling existed until I was halfway through high school, when I heard Richard playing with the band C Train, that rock band with Peter Rowan in it.
Dude, see, that's
the guys from the Blues Project.
Dude,
yeah.
mind-blowing band. I mean, and yeah, so go ahead. I'm sorry. You saw them on the East or West Coast?
Yeah, it changed my life. I was, at that time, I was on the West Coast. I was at a club called Pepperland in Marin County.
Oh, beautiful,
beautiful.
beautiful.
Seeing the Grateful Dead. I was back into guitar at that time. I was saying, oh, okay, I found an electric guitar for like $100 at the drugstore. And I said, oh, man, yeah, I could do this. Of course, there's 200 guys ahead of me in my high school alone just on lead guitar. I was learning my Eric Clapton licks as fast as I could. But, Richard came along with that band, and they were opening for the Youngbloods, of all people. So I'd gone to see the Youngbloods because, they had a song, Darkness, Darkness, they had a fiddle on it. And I said, wow, that's weird. There's a violin playing something. It turned out to be David Lindley. I was hoping to see David Lindley, but he's not in the band. But instead, C Train with Richard Green comes on, opens for the Youngbloods, changes my life utterly. In an hour, in the space of an hour, my life was changed. I was going like, wow, all the stuff I'm trying to do on guitar, I already have a little more stuff together on violin, really. So I could do this on violin, and nobody else is doing it in my high school. So I'll have a niche. I could plug the violin in and play real loud, and that's kind of one thing led to another. I was in the San Francisco Bay Area, so there's all this great stuff happening. Dan Hicks, the Hot Licks, was playing all over the area. And so there was this kind of connection to all music at that point. And, of course, we were listening to the FM stations, and everybody was playing everything. They would play Shostakovich, and then they would play Hendrix, and they would play, Django Reinhardt.
Like back to back to back to back to back.
Exactly.
Yeah, the ears were wide. Your ears were not locked. Okay, they were not locked.
DJs were educated, and they had freedom to do stuff like that, which was so great. Absolutely.
And so, I mean, again, Ponte wasn't on your radar at that point. In what he was doing.
No, not yet. That happened just a couple of years later. When I got into college, I was starting to listen to Frank Zappa and people like that. And then, of course, Ponte came in big time. What was interesting is that Ponte kind of had the same sound as Richard. They were using the same violin pickup.
Exactly. Well, so, I mean, again, Ponte started playing. What's amazing is he was playing free jazz. He was so blown away by Coltrane in France that he started to play.
Oh, yeah.
But he was literally playing for like one or two people, and he was ready to give up. And he was like literally ready to move on with his life. And then just by happenstance, John Lewis from the Modern Jazz Quartet, which was probably another impact on you. You mentioned he said he happened to go to see Frank Zappa. He happened to know Zappa, and he said, Frank, there's this and Frank was looking for this instrument to incorporate into his music, and he said, yeah, there's this guy Jean-Luc Ponty. You got to check him out. And next thing you know, they connected, and Jean-Luc was on King Kong, that record with George Duke, and there you go. I mean, it's this. There was a mysticism, and sort of going back to the Beatles. Aside from the fact that Ringo Starr is just a field drummer, he's not like a chops drummer, but it's like, was it the endless or seemingly boundless potential to go anywhere in music? What was it, the optimism? What was it about the Beatles for you that changed your musical point of view?
Yeah, I think it was that, that kind of eclecticism. It's all music. We're going to try everything. We're going to be creative. We're going to use funny chords. We're going to just go. We're going to do sweet. We're going to expand the structure. Of what we're doing. We're going to have crazy. We're going to put different melodies together and under and over, and we're gonna like go here, we're gonna go there. That and that whole spirit of exploration of that period was kind of in that same ballpark. I just thought that was what you were supposed to do, and I loved it. And I would listen to music. I would come home, I'd put on the Boston Pops playing Rhapsody Blue, and then I put on Sgt. Pepper, and then I put on Disraeli Gears, Wheels of Fire, and I just go through it. It's just, wow, this is the most amazing stuff. And that kind of became my life. And then I put on John Fahey, and I'd read the liner notes to John Fahey records, that he used, $5 words, and I love that too. You would talk about.
This is amazing. I'm sorry. I've been trying to. I've been into Lindley's running for the woods for me. He doesn't know what he's getting into. But that dude was back in '66. I've done 3 interviews with Keltner. Keltner said that they were teaching at a music store on the second floor. Keltner was giving snare drum lessons. Gary Foster was giving clarinet. And then Lindley was teaching banjo, but you heard him playing fiddle.
Incredible.
With, I'm sorry, which band did you think that he was on the record that you thought you were going to see him?
Oh, I went to see the Youngbloods, but
I did. It was the Youngbloods. So one of the tracks had
C-Train was opening for the Youngbloods, so that's what turned me on to this whole universe. And then I started discovering that there bluegrass existed, and that it kind of, the world opened up from there. It was between Dan Hickson's Hot Licks leading me to the Hot Club of France, all that stuff. I just realized there was a lot of, and then of course hearing John Hartford. You can't not buy a record that has a picture of John Hartford with those goggles on it. I didn't know what I was buying, and then it turned out to have. So
I am still looking for the seminal John Hartford album, and I've really never come across it. Is Morning Bugle?
Well,
Morning Bugle.
So many.
I mean, Morning
Bugle preceded Aeroplane, but for me, Aeroplane was when everything went nuclear.
Why is that? Well, why is that?
Well, it's when bluegrass met marijuana, and
or
baby,
psychedelics, maybe psychedelics.
Well, I don't know. It was, to me, it was like, it was softer than that. It was like more, it's more conversational and more, it wasn't really like the, I'd already been through the psychedelics with like Sgt. Pepper and all that stuff, This was like bluegrass. John was basically playing something that sounded like bluegrass, but it was totally original, and he was talking about things that I understood. It wasn't about somebody, a little log cabin in the lane or a little red house by the lake, someplace, where, everybody had their shotgun and they were hanging out and, eating pigs,
right,
and stuff. It was like my experience, which was kind of, slightly altered, but contemporary, and as he was writing, the songs on that record were just beautifully put together. They didn't have to rhyme. They were funny. There was all this stuff. And Vassar was just going mad. It wasn't folk music. It was new music. It was new acoustic music.
Wow,
and that's
interesting.
What killed me. And so between everything else, that and everything else, I was kind of ready to meet those guys. And I went to Santa Cruz, California, and went to college. And my big career decision was to drop out of college after 2 years and go to work in, playing bluegrass in a pizza parlor. But this is the San Francisco Bay Area, so everything was connected at that time. A lot of artists, all, now it's too expensive to live there if you're an artist.
Well, they've pushed all the art. Yeah, it's all gentrified now. Yeah.
But that's how things go. That's okay. But at that time, it was incredible. It was like the most fertile area. People were working at every level. I was going to fiddle conventions, contests and conventions in San Jose and Modesto, out in the valley, where, guys were still wearing cowboy hats and they were serious about it, And that was happening. I was meeting people like Byron Berline, who was one of the nicest people in the world and very helpful to me personally, just trying to develop my fiddling. And so, and just hanging out in Santa Cruz. I took the one class I took that was useful to me has been at the University of California, Santa Cruz, where their mascot is a banana slug, was given by a guy named Marsh Lester, who may still be with us. I think he's still around. Who basically took the class through the Harry Smith anthology of folk music and just commented on it and
Right.
talked about it. Incredible, very knowledgeable guy who also happened to be a great Reverend Gary David style guitar player, a really good banjo player, a pretty good mandolin player, and a terrible fiddle player. So I actually had something to offer him in return as far as just, basic technique on fiddle. So we got along. I later learned, and he taught me so much, just through that class and through hanging out. And I learned later, like 30 years later, that he was also the guy who turned Jerry Garcia on to folk music. Not in an official capacity, but as a buddy, somebody who just was hanging out in the Palo Alto area.
Really?
During, like, way before I was, I was like that, here I am, I'm sitting there, going like, man, I wish I could play with the big kids, like those guys, there's just a couple of years, like maybe 8 years ahead of me, this whole, the guys that were hanging out in Washington Square, like David and Richard, all those guys that were doing the jug band stuff. Well, man, this is amazing. Those guys, they're just a little too old for me to hang, which is probably good because it probably kept me out of some trouble, as far as like drugs and things like that.
Right.
But I finally got to hang with the big kids when I went to work with David, and that was an amazing experience.
Did you? I just want to be clear. I want to be clear though. This is before the career, before what mainstream society considers the beginning of Anger's career. Did you have it?
This is like 1971 to 1975.
Right. No. So I want. What was the first? Yeah. Did you have a band of your own before you joined David?
Oh man, I had tons of bands. It was Santa Cruz. It was like a beach town. I was in 5 different bands. I had my own band. I was in other people's bands. I was sitting in with people. We were doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and it was great because it was all full. It had a great acoustic music store with guitars, and I was building instruments. I was building banjo necks, and then I got into building, mandolins, bluegrass mandolins. Built those in the basement of the house. I was paying $90 a month rent and going down to the basement.
Were you?
A friend of mine had a bandsaw.
Were you playing Watsonville at the wooden roller coasters and things like that?
Yeah, we were playing everywhere. We were playing up the hill. Yeah, well, you've been out there.
Well, so, no, I haven't.
Okay.
What I want to know is
we would open for Doc Watson, and my band would open for Doc Watson at the Santa Cruz Civic Auditorium. That was how I got in and met David and Vassar. Older Than the Way played the Santa Cruz Civic Auditorium, and I knew the guys that the security people. So I just got backstage, and when they played, I walked right up to David and Vassar and said, "Hey guys, I love you guys. You're the most amazing. I'm a fiddler too." And I think they were just so charmed by the fact that somebody had come backstage to not meet Jerry Garcia.
Exactly.
That they kind of like remembered me later. So it was kind of cool.
Okay, so I mean, what was the instrumentation in your band?
Oh, whatever. It was, a lot of fiddle, sometimes 2 fiddles. There was guitar, obviously. Whoever I could get. There were a lot of, we were all young. We were doing 14 different things and not really caring too much about it.
But as far as it was still the concept.
Well, I had a straight bluegrass band.
Yeah. And
straight, when I say straight, I mean straight because it was like these Christian surfers from Fresno had come over and because they wanted to live in Santa Cruz to surf. And they played bluegrass, and I was the fiddler in that group. And that was a great group because we were obsessed with time and tone, just like you're supposed to be when you're doing bluegrass. And a couple of the guys could sing. That was great. So I was doing that, and then I was doing this kind of crazy sort of copy band of the original Great American Music Band that we were, because I'd gone to see the Great American Music Band, which started
with Taj Mahal
playing bass.
Yeah. David Nickturn
version of the band.
Okay, yeah, you saw with John Kahn.
I did not see that version of the band. What band I saw was with Richard and David and John Carlini, who I'm sure David has bet your ear about. John Carlini.
I've never heard that name. Who is John Carlini?
This guy, the great, genius of early dog music, who, after that version of the Great American Music Band broke up, they did a tour opening for Maria Muldaur, who had just had her Midnight at the Oasis hit. They went all up and down the West Coast, and that was John Carlini, an additional guitar player named Ellen Carney, who never played an open position chord during the entire show.
Holy cow.
And a fellow named Joe Carroll.
Dude, the bass dude, see, he's on that strings record with Dog, and I mean, dude, Joe Carroll, unreal bluegrass bass player.
Amazing.
Wait, was Buell Neidlinger in there at all? I mean, that dude's insane too, man.
Buell was a later development who I actually got to meet and became friends with. But this is kind of this weirdly interim moment that nobody really knew about. But I went to, again, so funny, I went to see the Country Gazette at the Great American Music Hall. Oh man, the Country Gazette. Oh yeah, and then wow, it sounds like something with David and Richard. I got to see that too, and they're opening for the Country Gazette. So that should be cool. Well, at least I had the sense to know that whatever Richard was involved with was going to be great. But again, another total life-changing, life-blasting experience with this group. David and Richard fronting a band with two other guitar players and this bass player, and they were playing a lot of David's, opuses, like the big ones, the symphonic ones, like Dogology and, Thailand and
really,
Dog's Right.
And we're talking like 74, right?
This is 74.
Yeah, unbelievable.
October 74. October 24th, 1974.
And it was Carlini. It was Carlini,
John Carlini,
Grisman Green, and Joe Carroll.
Joe Carroll, and another guitar player, this guy, Ellen Carney.
And so there was no Taj, there was no Nickturn, and there was no Garcia.
No, this was kind of post that. That had kind of started. That got him a gig.
I dig.
And then they came in and opened for, and I just happened because I knew it was going to be cool. I brought my old cassette machine and just threw the cassette machine onto the table, at the club in front of me and recorded the whole show. And again, it just blew my mind because some of those elaborate arrangements were kind of in place at that point. It was a little clunky. We didn't have the speed. I mean, once we got Tony in there, things, we went into power glide and overdrive, but it had a concept, these incredible symphonic arrangements of these, very involved and pretty complicated tunes that David had written. And between David, and Richard and the bass player, Joe, and John Carlini, who, after that band broke up, he went to work as the conductor of the Ice Capades for 15 years. But he was a guy that knew everything, about music, structure, theory, could write everything down, was a brilliant arranger. And I think he was kind of the key to a lot of that stuff becoming, solidified in a form that, was so brilliant. And he kind of made it possible for that stuff to get remembered and worked out in a form that was playable.
Can I ask you? I want to ask you a question though. This is interesting because I've done we're vacillating between the psychedelic era of the Beatles, and now we're sort of into the early to mid 70s. But was it the type of thing where they were playing the Great American Great American String Band? Was that okay?
Music band, yeah.
The music band. They were essentially fusing, playing traditional American folk tunes, but then once they would sort of play the head, then they would wind up totally in almost a jazz setting where they would just be improvising and maybe stretch it out for 10 or 15 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. Which was, basically, but even more structure, especially with David's material, which, a lot of all the stuff where, there would be like like long solo over like completely different than what's in the head. And then, there might be a third part, that everybody, the highly arranged part that everybody would play that would bring them back into, this surprising recapitulations. They had all this amazing stuff that was going on. And they were playing just straight ahead treatments of Duke Ellington material also and Thelonious Monk stuff. They throw that in. It's all grist for our mill. It's just, this is American music. And that, that attitude was, exactly. I mean, I just felt like, oh, this is the music I was born to play. This is what I have to do this. I will do it. I'm going to take my tape home. I'm going to learn every song that they played on the set, every melody, every harmony, and every solo that Richard takes. I just learned it. I just learned the whole fucking show. And, so when, a few months later, when Todd Phillips, when that band blew apart, everybody needed to make some money. Richard went with Loggins and Messina, and John Carlini went to the Ice Capades, and David was teaching mandolin at the Blue Bear School of Music up in Marion County.
Wow.
My friend Todd Phillips went to take some mandolin lessons from him, and after he graduated to just kind of go into David's house and jamming, he brought me along, and I knew all of David's material. I mean, I was playing basically Richard Green solos, but I knew it. I could play it. I knew all his stuff because I was and I had started a band in Santa Cruz to play some of that material. Obviously we couldn't really deal with it, in the same way. I was like dragging these guys along, kicking and screaming. Oh yeah, we gotta have another part here, and then like I'm gonna echo you, and you're gonna do this, and then there's gonna be some other shit. And then, but the fact is, I was, I just felt like I was born to do that.
Absolutely. I mean, Darol Anger burning away here. So I mean, could you just talk about your concept, and this could be with Turtle Island or any of the work you've done with David, but just the concept of the idea that any note can be the one.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. Yeah, I think that's,
what's your way of looking at it, especially when you get into a setting where you have trust on the bandstand, you play a lot live, so that when you guys lose that form, and then you all come back in on that one, when any note can be the one. Just riff on that.
Yeah. I think it's really important that everybody kind of be in the same space. Being able to hear what's going on around you and playing what is appropriate. But that also includes everybody needs to have a similar sense of story, because it really comes down to story. It's there's things are kind of good, and then something happens, and then there's like plot all of a sudden, and there's like, oh no, this is there's like weird stuff going on, and then there's and then maybe there's a fight, and then they people kiss and make up, and then the things are okay, and that whole idea of like some kind of story that can be manipulated through just rhythm and harmony and melody. It's really the essence of that. And we did a lot of trying to develop our free playing, in David's group. We were listening to jazz. I was already into jazz. I had always been in jazz. I didn't even know it was jazz. But
what?
Really started working on that.
Yeah.
Stuff.
What do you mean? What do you mean you didn't know it was jazz? What kind of stuff?
Well, when I was like 8 years old or whatever it was, and we got that David Brubeck record, I just, this sounds like music to me.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's music, right? And then all this cool stuff happens, and the drums do something, and then like the saxophone plays some melody, and then the piano pounds really hard, and then it gets quiet, and then it's loud, and all that stuff, So that was, it was very, but the idea that people would go off and take solos and improvise on changes. That was ingrained very early on for me. That's what you did. You just, and people would play together and they would make up stuff, based on what they were hearing. And you just had to get good enough so that you didn't have to think about what you were doing on your instrument. It was all, in the lower brain function, so that you could actually think about, what kind of story you were telling.
Oh, yeah.
Use your mind for that, right? So that, and that, easier said than done, right? Especially on an instrument like the violin.
Well, I mean,
which,
really, you guys make it look easy, and it's, you know.
Well, that's the gig, right?
Right. Well, no, it's true, and it's true. It is. I mean, but yeah, because if you don't, you have to do it well, because if you don't do it well, it becomes a mess, and it really is like, I mean.
And if it seems like it's a lot of work, then it's a lot of work for the audience, and they're thinking about, oh man, what he's playing is really hard, instead of thinking, wow, this thing is happening, and then I'm having my own thoughts, my own story, in the context of the story that they're telling. Yeah. You don't want it to be an athletic event. There's athletic events for that. Right?
Did you, when did you actually first play? I know David brought in, eventually to record, I don't know if you were on this album or not, but I think he brought in Hal Blaine to play traps. I'm just wondering when you had it the first time.
Oh, yeah.
When was the first time you played with a trap drummer?
Well, that was kind of post me, that whole period.
Yeah.
Because, Tony left and I left and Mike Marshall left. And so, he was kind of looking for, he wanted a different sound. He wanted to change. Hal Blaine is one of the great storytellers in the music business, knows everybody, knows everything. So it stands to reason that, I think anybody would want to hire Hal Blaine, at least for a while, just to get the culture, just become, just be more hip to the American music culture. So that, there was that, of course. I'd played with traps, drum sets, all through my, school years, playing rock and roll and playing in Santa Cruz, college, all that stuff. I was always sitting with drummers. I sat in with a couple of guys that used to be in Mo Grape. That was pretty cool.
Wow.
Because I really liked that. They made that one record, Omaha, and those guys had rhythm. That's pretty much all they had, actually. Did they ever have it?
Who were the drummers? Who were the drummers in that band?
Who knows? I can't even remember. Now it's too much. I'm too old. But I don't know. It was a tremendous rhythm unit. They had some really hard to decipher lyrics about something or other. But man, when they started in, it was just like, man. And when I think about all the music that I liked before I really knew much about music, I go back. Sometimes I hear stuff on the radio or wherever that I used to listen to, and it's invariably, it's got an incredible groove, whatever it was,
I dig it, man.
Seems to be the thing, it's just what I respond to.
How much of a conscious decision do you, in today's world, do you try to avoid machines in your recording process?
Oh, I dig machines. I seldom record to a click because I've had a really good education in rhythm through David and Tony particularly, and and through some other folks like David Baker, the great jazz educator, who left us this last year, which was really sad. But it's that stuff is useful. It has its place. I like some of the like the really complicated, weird electronic dance music where people are just doing a lot of crazy effects and things like that. It's pretty cool. I don't see anything wrong with that.
I guess
stuff.
what I'm saying is, like, do you like to me when I interviewed Rick Marotta, the drummer, he said that basically when the drum machine came in, cats started to try to imitate a machine, and now you look at
Right.
modern music today, or
Oh, you got the beat patterns. Yeah. It's
you
always about beat
can't even
patterns.
tell who's playing. You can't even tell. There's no individuality in the sound. Before, you had to copy the records, and then
Uh-huh.
ultimately there was no one. There was not so much stuff to copy, so that basically you you had your own individual sound. So I mean,
Yeah.
do you use drum machines, or do you always like to have the real human heart?
Well, yeah, like I say, I mean, a machine is, it's gonna. I mean, you can manipulate a machine. It takes a million years to, I mean, what I'm saying is like it takes a long time to make a machine sound like a human being, and probably the best solution to that is just get a human being.
Right.
You'll save a lot of time and money, but it's, I think that also, there's a corollary to that uh, sort of the general level of of groove ability by humans, has probably been raised. The bar has been raised a bit. Be from just having it. Say, oh man, that machine. Because if you know how to program a machine, you can get a hell of a groove out of it. It's not going to sound like a human being, and I prefer to work with human beings. But I'm just not going to draw any lines on that. I think there's a place. It might not be. I mean, I have personal preferences. I don't like pop music very much right now. It's like the same melody lick over and over.
And there's no dynamics, and there's no dynamics either, really.
Well, it's dynamic. I mean, there are dynamics, but they're more like everything stops or everything starts. It's like,
Right. No, I'm actually. I should have made myself clear. More like pop lyricists, like in vocals.
Uh-huh.
You do not hear dynamics in pop. I mean, I've interviewed enough engineers,
Yeah.
to know that. I mean,
Uh-huh.
and I just think
Okay.
that because a lot of times you go see a show or you hear something and it starts at
Uh-huh.
10, and it never
Oh
it
yeah.
never changes. You know what I'm
Yeah.
getting at?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I don't really go to that many shows, but I mean, there's a whole there's a whole world of anti that. I mean, look at a group like Lake Street Dive, for
Right.
instance, which is totally popular. People love that group, and that is that's like they're just doing Motown, but at such a high level, and it's all human, and it's all great, and so there's always that, and then there's like the sort of the the kind of mooncalf, backlash to that, where it's just one kid in his bedroom, it's, a little white kid who doesn't know anything, but he's singing about something.
Right. Right.
He doesn't know why he's unhappy, but he is.
But can I ask you about, like, I mean, are you, when you do recording sessions, whether you're, I mean, is there a lot of overdubbing? Do you like to have people in the studio at the same time? Because I mean, that's part of the issue today is like,
Uh-huh.
hey
Oh,
man,
yeah.
can you email me, can you overdub a guitar part and then email
Yeah.
it to me?
Well, I've done it both ways. I've done it, and recently, yeah, I finished a record called E-anda, which is one E-anda, two E-anda. It's like, how do you find the groove?
Right.
Which is a bluegrass instrumental record that was all live. Pretty much everybody, I did a couple of fixes on my fiddle part because the fiddle was so squirrely, and I was producing it. But it's basically a live record. That's beautiful. And then I've done projects like the Heritage record, which was mostly overdubbed, built up layer by layer. Took me 2.5 years to put this together. But if you get the right people, you can have a very alive situation, because people still react to each other, even if it's a recording. You get somebody like Dale Fleck and David Lindley and people like that playing together. They will make it happen. They'll make something happen because they're such good reactors. So there is that. It's kind of basically what you have to do what's possible. And I love getting bands together and playing together, but I also love painstakingly fashioning a highly sophisticated timepiece. It's like a beautiful watch or incredibly complicated thing, And right now we have a recording studio in my house that's basically the size of a small attic. So when I record with my wife, Emmy, we do the guitar and an octave mandolin, and we just do it without a click. We just get the songs happening, and then we add a bass player, and the singer goes down, and then we add more people, one by one. So we have a live basic track, something that sounds like it, it did happen. It was a story. So there's tons of ways to do it,
No, I dig.
Really,
I dig. It's not the way music in general and vocabulary. Like, it's great to have the home studios. It's music truly came out of regional communities in our country. It was human beings that saw each other all the time. And I just, all I'm saying is I'm not trying to be naive, and I realize that we live in this time period, but there's something about the intimacy of and that speaks to the longevity of people staying together in bands too.
Absolutely, I totally, I'm with you on that, and there's a lot of very positive things. The rise of house concerts,
absolutely.
where
we got
get together.
You know who came down to Tucson a few years ago when I was working as a journalism teacher at a private school. He performed at the school and then went to a house concert. It was Freebo.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah,
Freebo's coming down and singing about contemporary society. I dig the house concert. Anger. Listen, we've been burning for 58 minutes. I mean, I hope that you're gonna. I'm gonna first of all reach out to your what is it? Your son-in-law. Because I want him in the studio.
He's great.
No, I want you to connect. It's Jake Ransom, and then also I would love. I mean, I don't know. Your daughter is your daughter here too, or just your son-in-law?
Just son-in-law. Yeah, he's just got there. Like, he's still looking for a place to live.
All right, well, let me.
But he's going to be.
Please connect us, because I've been here since 2003. I got all my life has occurred. All the most beautiful stuff in my life has occurred right here, so I'll be glad to link up with him. And if you find
that's fantastic.
If you find yourself down here too, I'd love to connect in person. Next time we could do part 2.
Well, parents always follow their kids. So we'll probably try to look for a gig down there.
Well, I mean, is it there? You know what? I think that let me work on that. It may not be at the Trump Tower, but it might be a gig.
Well, it'd be fun. Even a house concert would be great.
Yeah, no. Let me cook on that for a minute. And
oh, thanks, Jake.
Yeah, listen, Darol, it was a great hang, and I'll be getting. I'm really appreciative of. You dropping a lot of knowledge today, and I'll be blasting these stories out on new media, and I'll get you a copy of this later on. All right?
That's so much fun. Yeah. All right. That's great.
Yeah.
And just as just a little additional thing, that's what I tell my students at Berkeley all the time, and they're always surprised. It's like most people don't go to a concert to hear notes. They go because they want to be with cool people that are doing cool shit.
I think also there's a point that your generation is, because you learned from the original masters like Vassar, you were able to have, the idea is that there's a raising of the collective consciousness of the band, and then there's a communication between them and the audience, and that's something that it's not about monster chops or being so busy, because you wind up staring at the wall. That's it.
We are carriers of culture as well as, we pass on stuff that is important, and that's incredibly important. And I'm just starting to realize that, your role, either as a curator or a creator, and they don't fight each other. They should, inform each other.
All right, Anger. We'll be in touch, man. Much love to you. Thank you.
Right.
Yo, man. Have a great day, man. Later
right.
on.
Great. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Darol Anger, an incredibly gifted, verbose vocabulary builder on the violin. And we'll be back with Maruga Booker on the other side on the Jake Feinberg Show.